Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today in our presentation called Talk to Your Teen, a Dating Abuse Workshop. My name is Tracy Darling DeMarcus, and I am the Prevention Program Manager for the Women's and Children's Alliance. The mission of the WCA is to provide safety, healing, and freedom from domestic abuse and sexual assault. We do this in a number of different ways by providing services to members of our community in need. If the mission is what we do each and every day, our vision is why we do it. We are working to foster a community where individuals thrive in safe and healthy relationships, which is why it's particularly important for us to be out in the community talking to people about these issues, especially with young people and working with parents and families to ensure that everyone has safe and healthy relationships. So what do we know? Why is it so important to talk about these issues? Each year, nearly 1.5 million high school students nationwide experience physical abuse by a dating partner. Additionally, 1 in 3 teens will experience physical, emotional, or sexual abuse by someone that they're dating. Equally as concerning, almost 1 in 3 teens also acknowledge that they've committed violence towards a date. And then when we think about maybe teens aren't recognizing that they're committing these behaviors or doing these unhealthy or abusive things, we think, oh, well, parents obviously can pick up on this or know that something is happening. But in the same survey, 82% of parents thought they could recognize teen dating violence, but over half couldn't identify the actual warning signs. Relationships exist on a spectrum. And it's important to talk about how relationships fluctuate because no relationship is going to be 100% healthy 100% of the time. We grow and change as humans, and our relationships grow and change too. And sometimes things can happen that take those healthy relationships into kind of a gray area of unhealthy actions. But if that happens, it's really important to notice if both people or all people in the relationship are taking steps and making effort to make the relationship healthy again, there's a good chance that that relationship can go back towards the healthy end of the spectrum. But if those unhealthy behaviors start happening and one person or multiple people are not willing to work on it, not willing to acknowledge that their behavior is unhealthy or not helpful, and don't acknowledge that they need to change anything or work on the relationship, that's when you might see those unhealthy behaviors shifting towards the other side, towards the abusive side of the spectrum. So what makes a relationship healthy? There are lots of different things that can make a relationship healthy, but we find that if these things are present, there's a really good chance that that relationship is healthy. First, strong communication. In a healthy relationship, people should be able to speak their mind, be open and honest with their thoughts and feelings, and know that their partner is going to hear and respect what they are saying. Being supportive of differences in individuality is particularly important to talk about with young people because so many of their relationships begin because of shared interests or similarities, which can be a really fun part of a relationship. But there can be pressure to change or to go along with things just because they want to have a relationship with a particular person. So in a healthy relationship, both or all people should be able to be their true, authentic selves without fear of judgment or guilt. Trust and honesty we talk about together because you can't have one without the other. You can't have trust with someone if you're afraid that they're lying to you, but you also don't want to be honest with someone about how you're feeling or thinking if you can't trust that they're going to keep it to themselves and not spread rumors or share your secrets. Trust and honesty go hand in hand, and they build on one another. If we were to sum up a healthy relationship in one word, it would be equality. In any relationship, there should be a balance of power in all things. Respect. That's something that is often talked about, but can be really hard to define. Usually we know it when we feel it, or we don't. Respect is also often talked about in connection with the golden rule, or the idea of treating others the way that you want to be treated. However, people often have different ideas about how they want to be treated. So rather than talking about the golden rule, we talk about the platinum rule, which is treating others the way that they want to be treated. If you're doing this, you're showing respect. And finally, boundaries. In the simplest terms, boundaries are what we're okay with or not okay with. And boundaries tie into all of these other components. We should always be able to honestly communicate our boundaries. Trust that our partner or friends are going to support and respect our boundaries, even if they're different from their own. And sometimes people think about boundaries in terms of others. For example, I'm setting this boundary so you don't do this thing to me. But rather than talking about boundaries in terms of what we don't want others to do, we try to talk about boundaries in terms of what we would like in that relationship. So again, rather than saying, I'm setting this boundary to keep you from doing this thing, saying, I'm setting this boundary because this is what I need to feel safe and supported in this relationship. So now we're going to switch gears and talk about what makes a relationship unhealthy or potentially abusive, and how you might be able to recognize these things happening with a young person in your life. An abusive relationship is defined as a pattern of actions used to gain and maintain power and control over another person. And this abuse can happen between any two people and in all types of intimate relationships. For example, within romantic partners, families, even roommates, or very strong friendships. This is a tool called the Power and Control Wheel, and we use this for a few different reasons in our work. First off, there are some really strong misperceptions in our society that abuse can only be physical. And that's just not true. A relationship can be abusive without having any sort of physical violence happening whatsoever. So on this tool, you can see on the outside circle, physical and sexual violence. Those definitely can be present in an abusive relationship, but don't have to be. Everything else inside the circle are non-physical ways that abuse can show up in relationships. Oftentimes, these things are more subtle, they're more manipulative, they show up slowly and get progressively worse over time, and can honestly just be hard to identify as something that might be happening to someone. So using this power and control wheel can be a really great way to give somebody the words to explain the experiences that they're having in their relationship, and really give them the power to identify that what is happening to them is in fact abuse. So what are some specific warning signs of an unhealthy or abusive relationship that you may see as a parent or a caregiver or an adult in a young person's life? Their partner may be extremely jealous or possessive. This may be in terms of making them feel bad or guilty for not spending enough time with them or for spending time with other people. They may make accusations of cheating or using social media even as a means to control what their partner does. There are a lot of different ways that this can show up in a relationship, but ultimately having the young person feeling like they can't do anything or say anything or talk to anyone without making their partner upset. You may notice unexplained marks or bruises. Again, particularly with young people, may not be as obvious as, a black eye, but you may notice things like marks that look like fingerprints around the arm if somebody is being held to prevent them from walking away, that sort of thing. Their partner may message or text excessively, and this one can be difficult because teens and young people use technology in completely different ways than we do as adults. And so it may seem like they are texting their partner or Snapchatting or messaging with them more than you think is healthy as an adult or you think is normal as an adult. But really what this one comes down to is them being concerned or afraid that if they don't text or message their partner back, that there will be some sort of consequence or negative repercussion. That's when we see, some innocuous behavior, texting constantly, messaging back and forth, going from pretty normal teen behavior to a means of control, when there is that expectation of response and consequence if that does not happen. You may notice that your child is depressed or anxious. Again, sometimes these things can be difficult to identify. Teenage years are definitely a time of transition and they can be going through a lot of different things at this point in time in their life. But if you're noticing that this mood change is occurring, particularly when they have a new partner or somebody that maybe is showing some of these other signs, that might be an opportunity to ask some questions. Your child may stop participating in extracurricular activities or other interests. They may say things like, well, it just takes up too much time, or oh, I don't like doing that thing anymore. And that, again, may be true depending on, what this person is going through in their life. But there could also be pressure from a partner or even group of friends to stop doing something that they enjoy because it takes too much time outside of school, time that they don't get to spend with them. But again, that difference and individuality piece is really important in relationships. So again, maybe an opportunity to ask some questions about why they've chosen to stop participating in those activities. And then your child stops spending time with other friends and family. You may notice possibly that their friends that they were friends with forever stop coming around, or you don't see them around as often. They, again, might be experiencing some guilt or pressure from a partner saying, I don't like your friends, I don't want to be around them, or you spend way too much time with them, you should want to spend that time with me. Any of these things where, again, a choice is being taken away, or there's pressure for somebody to make a particular decision, or feel like they don't have the ability to say no, or that there will be consequences if they do say no. Those are the questions that we need to be asking when some of these behaviors come up, because those may be the indicators that some unhealthy behavior is happening. So let's start the conversation. We use the Teach Tips method developed by Dr. John Gottman, a leading researcher and clinician in relationships. Take a minute to relax with your teen. Be mindful about where and when you have this conversation. Maybe it is happening during a drive in the car that's just the two of you, or maybe you already have some time set aside during the week where you check in with one another, but making sure that there's some dedicated time with no interruptions or distractions so you can really focus on the conversation. Sometimes it's also helpful to have something else that the teen can focus on. Maybe it's doing something with their hands, a craft, or some sort of project, or even when you're driving in the car, sitting side by side and not forcing constant eye contact can make the conversation a little bit easier for them. Empathize with them. Relationships can be incredibly complicated. We talked about the relationship spectrum and how oftentimes relationships will fluctuate on that spectrum, especially if this is a young person's first relationship or an early relationship for them. They obviously don't have a lot of experience and are learning along the way. So rather than jumping in and trying to just solve the problem right away, they may be just looking for somebody to empathize and say, yes, relationships can be really hard, but I'm here to talk with you about it if you want. Acknowledge their feelings and needs. Provide validation by saying things like, I'm sorry, that sounds really hard, or it's not your fault. Ask clarifying questions like, what do you need to feel safe and secure in this relationship? Or what would feel better for you? Using these tactics, you are focusing on them and allowing them to identify and sort through the complex and confusing emotions they might be having. Connect with this young person by actively listening before sharing your own thoughts. So giving them the time and the space to express themselves, share what they're feeling before jumping in can be really, really helpful. So, asking clarifying questions if needed, but giving them the space to fully explain themselves or fully express what they're going through before jumping in with your own thoughts and opinions. Finally, help them solve the problem when they're ready. Just jumping in and saying, you have to do this, you need to do that, is probably going to shut them down to doing what you say, right? We all have that kind of instinct of no one's going to tell me what to do. Or when you say, don't do this thing, our immediate response is, I want to do that thing. So rather than just jumping in with those immediate problem-solving actions, give them the chance to get to a point where they're ready. Again, there can be a lot of confusing emotions tied up in this relationship. Maybe they're just starting to recognize some of these unhealthy behaviors, but not necessarily tip the scales into abusive actions quite yet. But opening up this conversation gives them the opportunity to know that you are a safe person to talk to about this. And if they come to a point later on where they do want to make a decision to leave that relationship or end that friendship, they know that you're going to be there to help and support them. So again, even though we may want to jump in as a problem solver and say, this is what needs to happen, that can lead to shutting down, not coming to you later on if things maybe get worse, or potentially even staying in that relationship even longer because they weren't ready at that point to make that decision. So again, the most important thing is just starting this conversation. Make that time for just the two of you. Put away your distractions, your phones, turn off the TV. Make sure you're not going to be interrupted or potentially even thinking about where you're having the conversation and if it'll be confidential. Listening respectfully, non-judgmentally, being aware of your nonverbal cues and your body language, because if you're uncomfortable or upset or angry, they will pick up on that. And then this can also be a great time to share your experiences from that age. Mention that you made mistakes. What did you learn? What came out of it? This is a great time for you to humanize the experience of being in relationships and let them know that, you went through things as a young person and they will too, but you're going to be there to help them get through it. So before going into this conversation with your young person, I just want to offer up a few opportunities to do some self-reflection. Again, before you go into a conversation that may be difficult, reflecting on your own experiences can be really helpful to making that conversation easier. Was there ever a time when someone, parent, caregiver, coach, etc., used the opposite approach of these tips with you? They didn't do the teach tips, they didn't take the time, they didn't empathize, they didn't connect, they didn't help when you were ready. How did that make you feel? And think about if they didn't do those things, were you open to going to them to talk about that relationship or that issue you were having after that? What's the hardest part of starting the conversation about these types of topics for you? Maybe it would be easier for you to talk through some of these things with another adult, maybe a partner or spouse or friend, practicing some of the ways that you're going to have the conversation. Practice makes everything a little bit easier, but thinking about how this conversation might be difficult for you and how you can make that easier for yourself. Because if you're uncomfortable having the conversation, your teen is definitely going to pick up on that. So making sure you're in a place where you're ready before bringing it to that young person. And finally, just thinking about what was something you wish someone had told you before you started dating. And have you told that to your child? Or how do you think you will be able to tell your child that? Sharing that wisdom and that experience and letting them know that you were young once and had similar challenges and made it through them, and that you are going to help them do the same thing. So what's next after you have the conversation? Encourage your child to learn more. Learning more about relationships, again, especially if they're new to them or if they're just starting out having relationships, romantic or otherwise, encourage them to get the information that they need. There are some really excellent resources out there specific for young people. These top two, Break the Cycle and Love is Respect, are both organizations that are devoted to the relationships of young people specifically. And then the National Domestic Violence Hotline, also a wealth of information, but encouraging them to learn more, maybe going on a little internet adventure together to some of these sites. They have some really amazing handouts, quizzes even that they can take, like, am I a good partner? Or is this relationship healthy? Those sorts of things. Maybe even doing that together could be a really great way to learn more about your relationships, both for you and your child. Our vision as the WCA is to foster a community where everyone thrives in safe and healthy relationships. And we truly believe that everyone plays a part in making this vision a reality for our community. So here are some things that you can do to help change our culture and reach that vision. Speak up, start conversations. Again, that's what this whole presentation is about. Starting those conversations, normalizing talking about relationships, normalizing talking about unhealthy behaviors or red flags, calling those out, calling attention to them, and making people aware of the resources that are available to them. Support and believe all survivors, whether that's your child or somebody else that you know. One of the most empowering things you can do is just believe them and tell them that, and then connect them to resources if you can. Model those healthy relationships behaviors. That can be one of the biggest learning tools, especially for people who maybe didn't grow up or experience the healthiest relationships when they were first learning these things. So modeling those behaviors for your kids, but also for their friends, for their peers, and for other adults in your life, because there are plenty of adults who could stand to learn a little bit more about healthy relationships as well. And then finally, carrying a shoe card, referring to the WCA, being familiar with the resources available in our community will make it so much easier for you to give that helping hand or that lifeline to somebody that needs it down the road. The WCA offers a number of services at absolutely no cost and confidentially to any member of our community who might need them. We operate two 24-hour hotlines, one for sexual assault and the other for domestic or dating violence. These hotlines are for survivors and folks who need connection to resources or services in our community, but they're also for people who might be concerned about someone and not sure what to do for them. So if you had concerns about your child's relationship or the relationship of someone else in your life, you can call the hotline and speak with an advocate 24 hours a day, discuss the different options and ways that you can support that person, and get more information about the services that they may be eligible for. All of these other services that we provide are completely free, and the best way to get more information about them or figure out how to access those services is through calling our hotline. Finally, if you are experiencing abuse or if any of this information struck a chord with you, please know that you can get help. There are so many resources out there, the WCA among them. If you're in immediate physical danger, always call 911 first. Unfortunately, our hotlines are not response lines. So if somebody calls our hotline, we cannot dispatch someone to them. So always call 911 first if you're in immediate physical danger. But know that the services of the WCA are offered confidentially to get that person to the safety, healing, and freedom from abuse. Thank you for spending the time today to learn more about talking to your teen or your young person in your life about relationships, what you can do as a parent and role model, and how you can help us make our community a safer and healthier place for everyone. Thank you.